tonight. This is really impressive, and it just shows how special our community is, and that the people here actually care about what's going on in our community, and that means a lot. Okay, so let's see here. Tonight's theme is public safety. We've got several informed neighbors and professionals to provide facts and helpful information for you, and there will be time to ask a few questions. I know this is a respectful crowd, but I want to remind everybody that most of our speakers are taking their free time to come and talk to us, and we can ask questions and offer ideas, but this isn't a debate, and arguing won't get us closer to real solutions, but I know that you all agree with me on that. Hopefully. If you're not aware, this is Disaster Preparedness Month, which is like perfect timing for a public safety meeting. So we have some disaster preparedness packets in the back there from Sac County if you want any of those. We also have some information on Neighborhood Watch and some other programs. So feel free to take some of that information when you leave tonight. And right now, let me see, where is Kevin? Is Kevin here? Smith-Fagan? Okay. Kevin's not here? All right.
I think he's outside still.
He's still directing.
Okay, all right. Then we're going to start with Monica Robinson. Miss Monica. She is going to discuss the neighborhood survey results.
Thank you. All right, everyone. So we compiled a survey probably in March. We've had about 70 responses, and the purpose of this to see how do we feel in Land Park. Do we feel safe? Where do we feel safe? And what areas can we improve? And where can we focus our advocacy? So, most people have said that they've lived in Land Park over 20 years that respond to the survey. 50% of people say that the quality of life in Land Park is worse today than when they moved. Not shocking. I've been here 11 years and say the same thing. What areas in Land Park do you feel safe to walk during the day? Most people, 85%, said they're on the street. 77%, this was, I thought, a very positive number, said in the park, which is really what makes us special. The Broadway corridor, big surprise, 24%. Floored when I saw that number. What areas do you feel safe to walk at dark? We could probably all guess this one. But most people actually said 74% on their own street, so that's lovely. 18% in the park, that is a pitiful number. Freeport Boulevard, only 27%. And this is a number that has to be improved, because these are where our businesses are. So if you don't feel safe walking from business to business, I do not know how you sustain a safe environment in Land Park. Broadway corridor, 8%. Those are a very brave 8% of people that live in Land Park, so good on them. Age-appropriate children riding unaccompanied around your house, it was about 35 to 40% only feel safe with their kids bike riding around their house. I'm guessing this is probably traffic related, which we will talk about later. But crime in our neighborhood. Have you witnessed a crime in the past 5 years? 45% said yes. Have you been a victim of a crime in the past 5 years? 31%. Has a neighbor been a victim of a crime in the past 5 years? 57%. And we have a lucky 27%, none of the above. Good for them. Okay. And let's see, safety devices in your house. So alarm systems, video cameras, those sorts of things, private security. 12% of our neighbors have private security. 35% have gun, pepper spray, taser, something of that sort. 52% have an alarm system. 51% have a camera. And so that is what we have to report. But hopefully in upcoming years when we do another one, these numbers will change, but we will see. Yes?
So at my house, I have 3 dogs, so I think that's should be on there too.
Funny you should say that. I, as a DA, had many cases where someone jumped the fence, threw a hot dog over, and there goes the dog.
Oh, no, 3.
So you never know. You have to, maybe don't have labs if that's your protective device. Any other questions? Okay, well thank you for whoever filled this survey out. It's helpful, and I've shared it with my friends at the DA's office, and we'll share it with law enforcement also. Yes,
Monica, how many responses did you get overall?
70, which I was hoping for more. That seems kind of no offense, like a lame number, but I aim high. What can I say? But I think that the people that did respond, we got a good, I think, mix. Not everyone was, Monica, Debbie Downer. We had some positive people in there. So, but no, I think this is good. We have things we can improve on, and this is, it really, a lot of the issues that we saw, because we had comments, I didn't bring the comments today, the vast majority, it's homelessness and traffic. Traffic was even higher than crime on our survey. So, but it was a close one too. So, all right.
Thank you, Miss Monica. Isn't she wonderful, you guys? We love Monica. Okay, Lieutenant Greg Galliano. Where is that gentleman? Here he is. Yes, South Command. He's going to give us some updates.
Sure, why not? I'll give it a try. Hi everybody, Greg Galliano, Lieutenant with your South Command. I'm the Executive Lieutenant, which has me in charge, second in command of the facility underneath our new captain, Captain Zach Bales. He was actually the Executive Lieutenant here several years ago. He's now back after a tour in the Chief's office overseeing everything, public information and accountability, internal affairs, and all of that. So now he's back out here as a command captain. He wanted to be here tonight to introduce himself to you, but he is teaching at the Citizens Academy. So he couldn't be here, but he wanted me to tell you, he's excited about taking a command, and really his focus is to help improve public safety and improve feelings of safety. So we're not just safe in our communities, but we feel safe when we're walking out the door, visiting businesses, having visitors over. And that's really his goal with his time here. So as your Executive Lieutenant and Geographical Lieutenant, I'm responsible for all crime strategies here in what we call Police District 4A. This is our District 4A. Doesn't match up with the council districts. We do it a little different based on crime data and drivability to reduce response times so that we can prioritize responding to 911 calls for service. And so here in 4A, I am responsible for all crime strategies, crime trends, and developing long-term approaches to help reduce crime here in the Land Park neighborhood, all the way from, and our 4A is all the way from Broadway, runs down almost to Fruit Ridge, and that's where it hits the next police district. So everything there in between the freeway and the river is our 4A, your neighborhood, what we call Land Park neighborhood. And so part of our biggest goal right now at the Sacramento Police Department is violent crime reduction. That is what we are focusing a majority of our efforts on. We recently did a department reorg, and we reevaluated every unit we had within the Sacramento Police Department to ensure that we are doing our best at responding to 911 calls for service and addressing violent crime, both long-term and short-term. And so that has really been the focus of our efforts. And with violent crime reduction, our goal is to be focused, balanced, and fair in our efforts as we try and reduce violent crime throughout the entire city. And in that, trying to find long-term approaches, we are a recipient of what's known as the Public Safety Partnership Grant. It's a federal grant which partners us with federal partners like the U.S. Marshal's Office, the FBI office, and really gives us access to a lot of resources to address crime in whole new ways that are very responsible, long-term, as opposed to what law enforcement throughout the nation used to do in the past, which was flood neighborhoods where there was high crime with lots of police officers and make lots of stops. That really led to over-policing, and it really didn't help anything. It would certainly suppress violent crime for a time, which would then return right afterwards and create quite a bit of distrust between law enforcement and communities. And so now the goal is to really have a much different approach where we do long-term investigations using data and intelligence. And so that's really been the focus of our efforts right now with the police department, and we are underway with a lot of different projects. We visit agencies throughout the entire nation to see if we can develop better practices that surround violent crime reduction. Our second big effort is really looking at some of the serious public safety hazards members of our communities have to deal with, primarily sideshows. And we have been dealing with sideshows really since I started in this profession about 17 years ago, and it goes well past back into the 70s. Sideshows have been a major issue throughout our region and spanning into the Bay Area. We have really tried a lot of creative efforts to address sideshows more recently, which includes bringing in lots of extra police officers when we have intelligence that there is going to be a sideshow, so that we can work to, I'll get you in 1 minute, so that we can work to do enforcement action with these individuals who are engaging in sideshow behavior, to remove vehicles, tow vehicles, and issue citations for all the different sideshow-related crimes. We recently did one such operation, which led to a handful of citations, arrests, towed vehicles, and a firearm arrest. We're also really working to locate who the presenters are of these sideshows and do significant outreach with them to make sure they know we're going to be here and we're willing to conduct enforcement action, because this behavior has to stop. On top of that, we work with all sorts of different entities where sideshows pop up, public entities, private entities, to try and see if there's ways for us to recraft the environment in a way that will make sideshows and sideshow behavior much more difficult. Adding concrete, looking at police observation devices, and other tools and resources to try and reduce sideshow activity. Our council just recently took sideshows on as well to try and find more holistic citywide approaches, including potential changes to some of our city codes that might give us more tools and resources for potential enforcement action for this type of behavior down the road. And so we're really hoping to have an effect on sideshow and sideshow behavior throughout our city, because, as you all know, it is dangerous, it is unacceptable, it consumes a lot of police resources, there's usually violence associated with it. We would love to address each and every one of them with all the resources we have, but sometimes sideshow events can have upwards of hundreds and hundreds of participants, and to address that would consume every police officer we have in the city of Sacramento working at that time, and we can't brown out all 911 calls for service to address a single sideshow. So we try and be responsible, handle them from a distance, make use of a certain law that allows us after the fact, if we can observe a person engaging in sideshow behavior, to author a search warrant and then seize their vehicle down the road and impound it for 30 days. I'll get you in 1 second, just hold your question. So sideshows being our second major focus and major update I wanted to share with you all. As a part of my role to talk more specifically for you here in the Lamb Park neighborhood, I've been working on the Broadway corridor, because I've heard from members of our community the concerns about Broadway and what's going on out there, and really trying to have, again, that focused and balanced approach where we understand that there are all sorts of different forms of criminal behavior happening on Broadway. So really, to help initiate some long-term strategies, we've been working with some of our city contracted community-based organizations, specifically those that address narcotics, and working with them to go throughout a lot of the homeless camps to try and offer narcotic resources for individuals who want to find their way out of the narcotic epidemic and try and find better solutions for their lives. On top of that, we have added an occasional, during our higher crime times and days, bike patrol officers who go up and down Broadway 2 days a week. Their primary focus to interact with the business community, to go in and check with businesses, offer tips and tricks of how the businesses can help improve public safety within their property, how they can report crime to us, how they can be more effective partners, many of them very receptive in doing so, and on top of that, to engage in enforcement action of any type of crime they may be observing in front of them on those days. We also did a Cops and Coffee out on Broadway earlier this year. We are planning to do a second Cops and Coffee later this year. We don't have a date for you yet or a location yet, but as soon as we do, we'll share it with the Community Association. You're all welcome to attend. Our goal is to bring folks out there, come and meet with us. We'll make use of Broadway in a positive way. We'll get eyes on Broadway, and we'll show that what type of behavior we're hoping is going to happen in that corridor to help really change the environment to help reduce crime along Broadway. We've also worked closely with the PBID, the Property Business Investment District, to try and help identify some of our locations, retailers who are more challenged and having more crime on their property, to really get more resources their way to help address some of that, because retail crime can turn to, crime throughout the rest of the neighborhood. So that's been a major focus of ours along the Broadway corridor. And then finally, traffic. And so I understand traffic is a major concern for all of you here in the Land Park neighborhood. And really every community meeting I go to, traffic and homelessness are the number 1 and 2 questions that come my way. And with our major focus being violent crime reduction and 911 calls for service, we do not have the same traffic response, the same traffic enforcement response we did several years ago. This isn't necessarily a resource issue where we don't have the ability or the funding for more police officers. This is just a staffing issue where we have vacancies we would love to fill, as we hope to get more folks applying to the police department to be able to bring back some of our programs. But as it stands, we have 8 traffic officers and 1 traffic supervisor who work as a team throughout the entire city during the day shift hours. And so they are responsible for traffic enforcement throughout all of Sacramento. And really what they do is they look at trends for collision information and collision data, and they will go and respond and do traffic enforcement in those locations. But understanding that enforcement isn't, really with staffing being a challenge, enforcement isn't our go-to as it used to be. We really try and focus heavily on education with members of our community to share with you, what can you do to help keep yourself out of a traffic collision, or what can you do to drive safely. Asking our motor team what were the highest volume of primary collision factors here in Land Park, they advised that for the most part they were right-of-way violations where one vehicle in some way, shape, or form enters the roadway and collides with another vehicle that had the right-of-way. And that's been the number 1 collision factor over the last 6 months here in the Land Park area. A lot of ways you can combat that, and I'm sure you've all heard the term defensive driving before. It's really anytime you are going to enter the roadway, taking a second to stop and ensure that you have free access to the roadway. It is super easy to let that highway hypnosis set in and just do what you're always used to. Pull out of your driveway, pull through an intersection, and not necessarily see what's going on around you and end up in a collision. The other piece of that is to help protect yourself from the individual doing that, really being as defensive as you can, and assuming that even though you have the right of way, another vehicle approaching you is not going to obey the rules of the road and could cause a collision, and driving defensively to protect yourself. And so really education being our number 1 tool that we can work with folks to try and say, hey, here's what's going on, here's what you can do to protect yourself. On top of that, we do always recommend more long-term solutions, since like I was saying before, with violent crime reduction in the past, really trying to get away from the model of flooding neighborhoods and doing significant amount of enforcement action, because of course a lot of folks want that for traffic, which is all fun and games until you're the one getting the ticket, and then my phone rings off the hook with complaints about why is everybody getting a ticket? So nature of the beast, right? But working with communities to look at long-term solutions, and we call those long-term solutions traffic calming. Different forms of traffic calming are ways to recraft roadways or even your own environment on your own property, like trimming bushes that may obstruct a stop sign, or trimming bushes on a corner that could obstruct a turn. All sorts of different traffic calming devices that can happen in the public right-of-way, like speed bumps and roundabouts and bulb outs. I don't have any specific recommendations for you folks, because I know there's specific areas of concern here in Land Park. That's not the police department to give those recommendations. That comes from traffic engineering with the experts who know what can be done, what can't be done. There's all sorts of regulations on traffic calming. So I definitely hear you. I know the concerns. Our motor team, like I said, cycling through the city, knows the areas of concerns here in Land Park. They do focus on them. We do make contact with the schools, especially when the school year starts, to remind them, to have conversations with parents. What can we do to help keep our kids safe as we're going to school, understanding that the days of being able to put a motor cop on every corner aren't necessarily a reality. So let's find other solutions to work together to fix that problem.
You said something about Broadway and about bicycle officers. Can you
Yes.
share that?
Sure, yes. So when I first came back here, so I've been here for almost a year. I came out of our professional standards division, which is our internal accountability, audits, inspections, policy division, as the executive lieutenant. When I got here, I wanted to know what were the highest areas where there were crime and calls for service, and there were, no surprise, there were a lot of issues on Broadway, and there were issues during certain days of the week, during certain times. And Broadway is a very unique corridor, very much like downtown, very grid-like, which would lend itself well to bicycle patrol. So we decided pretty much on overtime to get a couple of bike officers working as a pair out there on Broadway a couple of days a week during peak hours, literally riding up and down all of Broadway, checking in with businesses, seeing if they see active narcotic use, active drinking in public, any other public safety concerns, and then taking enforcement action as necessary. We're still trying this out to see, do we have some type of effect on crime and the feelings of public safety, right? Do folks feel more comfortable seeing the bike officers going up and down Broadway, checking with the businesses, making it a more enjoyable place to be?
Do we know the dates and times that they're doing that?
I can share that with you. Wednesdays and Fridays right now are what we're using them on. Those days and times kind of showed some spikes. There was somebody in the back who had asked a question that
I don't have a question because I know what it is. I'm on the board here. Thank you so much for coming out. I think a lot of people aren't aware of what a sideshow is.
Sure.
So if you could
Great.
let them know. I mean,
Great
we grew up
question.
in the Bay Area hip hop era. So.
Yeah. Okay, sideshow. Fantastic question. What is a sideshow? Why do I take these for granted? I use acronyms all the time to call me out because I forget. Sideshow. So sideshow, it's kind of a nebulous term, right? It's kind of a tough term to describe, but that's when you have a group of individuals, definitely in cars, maybe motorcycles, who take over an intersection or a parking lot and start doing different types of reckless driving behavior, whether it's donuts or whether it's some type of speed contest. A lot of times you'll see them form circles, and in the circles, other people will start doing donut activity. A lot of times folks are showing up to these things armed. We get calls of shootings because they will shoot guns off in the air as they're engaging in this behavior. Sideshows are unacceptable and dangerous, right? They cause damage to the neighborhood. They put members of our public at risk. And so that's why it's been a very big focus for us. So thank you for the question. I very much appreciate that. Yeah, you had your hand up before, I believe?
Yeah, so now that the city is investing in developing the Broadway corridor and putting resources there to make it more attractive, pedestrian friendly, et cetera, is part of the city's strategy sustaining these efforts so that it's somewhere where people want to be and where businesses want to go?
What efforts would you?
The ones you were describing.
Sure. So at least for us at the police department, for our efforts that we're trying out on Broadway, we are seeing what type of effect and difference we make, right? Before we can necessarily say anything will become a permanent staple of what we're up to as far as our bike patrol. I am always committed to doing as much community outreach as possible, I prefer the term community partnership, right? A Cops and Coffee is our ability to partner in public safety and continuing those as often as we possibly can. That is something we've done for a long time and we will likely continue to do. Obviously took a little hiatus during COVID where you saw a lot of those disappear off the map as we slowly bring them back. But some of the other crime strategies, it really depends on what type of effect we see over the long term. Being responsible, data-based, data-driven, not just necessarily saying, okay, we like this and we're going to keep doing it. But I appreciate that question. Yeah, go ahead.
When you're saying violent crime, how do you define violent crime?
Oh, for the most part, we're looking at violent gun crime, shootings. That's really the prime, what we're looking at, and obviously pretty self-explanatory for that. But anything that would qualify as violent crime, right? Domestic violence, calls for service, any felony violent crime, serious assault calls, knife-type calls, reducing any way, shape, or form we can what would be deemed a violent crime or some crime that has violence attached to it, most likely above the misdemeanor level, right? Above the simple assaults, but more highly violent. Right. I know, that's just the name of it, simple assault. What is it? There's no such thing.
Nobody else? Okay, I have a question. So,
violent crime and traffic seem to be your two that you're talking about. But what about drugs? Like drugs is just nonstop, and I understand we need to report, we see something, but it's just nonstop. And so I understand that you don't have a narcotics enforcement team. So how are we enforcing the drugs?
How are we enforcing drugs? Great question. You've heard us say it a million times, right? Changes with Prop 47 and how narcotics laws all work. So the focus of narcotics is, for the most part, narcotics dealers, right? The dealers who are supplying individuals, especially taking advantage of very vulnerable people experiencing homelessness in that population. And so dealers being a major focus of effort. And so you often find that violent crime and narcotics are often associated. And so we have a violent crime reduction team that operates here in the South area. Each of our 4 commands that operate throughout the city have a violent crime reduction team. Somewhat recently, our violent crime reduction team conducted an investigation, search warrant. I want to say, don't 100% quote me, I know I'm on camera over there, but I want to say it was over 1,000 fentanyl pills as a part of that search warrant, as well as firearms. And so there is a nexus, and narcotics is a piece of the investigation for violent crimes, especially when the two are linked. We also have a problem-oriented policing team. They've been around for a long time. In fact, years ago, I was the problem-oriented policing sergeant down here. And they also do narcotics-related investigation, really looking at that dealer-level element, supplying areas, because just like many other issues, we could go out all day long and address use behavior, but that use behavior is never going to change until you start to address dealers, right? That's why for the use behavior, we work with our community-based organizations who specialize in helping folks out of that lifestyle, being addicted to narcotics, and hopefully find their way into the best version of themselves out of that lifestyle, where we try and hold dealers accountable. So it is a part of what we do on both sides, both the community-oriented policing and the violent crime reduction.
That said, the violent crime reduction team and the community response program, where is that line right now as far as drugs?
So they will conduct narcotics-related investigations that come across their plate in some way, shape, or form.
But they're not the response.
Response for.
So, who is going to respond to it first?
Well, it would depend. If we're receiving calls for service from members of the public, we're seeing drug-related activity. Yeah. That would be patrol. So there's many tiers to crime and crime response, right? So if you see crime in your neighborhood, like a person actively using narcotics, you can call a non-emergency number. Unless you see some type of violence associated with that, you can call 911. But if you see narcotics being used in public, that would be something our patrol would respond to. And then our patrol officers will communicate often with our problem-oriented policing team, who look at trends, who look at where we're seeing lots of these type of issues, which gives them intel on how to turn to a dealer or where to look for dealer. How do I pick? I know. I can't pick. You pick. Okay. She was the lucky one. Sorry about that. Thank you.
So if I understand right then, so say on Broadway where you have, by the post office and you have a large group of people, if they're using drugs, do your patrol people acknowledge that, or is it they try and find out who the dealer is that's supplying them and they just go that direction?
Yeah, that's a good question. So if our patrol folks come across a spot where drugs are being used, a patrol officer can, and most likely would, if they came across narcotics being used, take some type of enforcement action, right, whatever that may be. And then our problem-oriented policing team looks to see, okay, this could be a one-off, right? This could just be one person who's in this one place at this one time using narcotics, versus where you see a lot of narcotics being used in one location, there's likely some type of dealer element.
Remind you that we've had some change in the law, like Lieutenant Galliano has mentioned, and you'll probably hear it throughout the meeting tonight. We have an election coming up next year. There's a change in our assembly, 6. We're going to have a change in the mayor. We're going to have a change in a couple of city council people. All these people can help advocate for legislation that can help with our public safety. So I would advise, if you haven't, really get to know who's running, ask them what's their platform, ask them real questions, don't be afraid, you know, because it's like we have an opportunity to change things for the better, and if we ignore it, we're going to get more of the same. So there's only so much officers can do. They have to follow the law, and they have to do what they're told, basically. Okay, so next person. I am the current president of Land Park Community Association. This is the former president of Land Park Community Association. Friend, neighbor, and community advocate, Stephanie Duncan. She's going to talk about Justice for Neighbors.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So I'm going to provide information about Justice for Neighbors, not because I'm a professional, but because I've actually utilized the resource. So I want to make sure that hopefully you will never have to use this, but just know that it is out there in case you do. So Justice for Neighbors started in 2006, and it brings together multiple city entities. And I'm going to read it straight from the Justice for Neighbors website. So it brings together the city attorney's office, police department, fire department, community development department, code enforcement, housing and dangerous buildings, and animal care services divisions. And what they do is when they get reports about nuisance issues in the community, each of those entities can investigate what's happening. So in the case of what I dealt with on my street about 7 years ago, we had a apartment complex that had 6 units, and 2 of those units had elderly gentlemen living in them who were selling drugs to the homeless. So, looking at what was going on, I noticed that people were coming to their doors. I noticed people were passed out in front of their doors, and I actually parked nearby. I don't necessarily recommend it, but I like doing it. And I would take pictures and film video of people going to the doors, knocking, the door would open, there would be some type of exchange, and the homeless individual would then leave the area. And I followed one guy once, I don't recommend that either, but he ended up going behind a dumpster in a business along Broadway to use his drugs. So what I ended up doing was not only noticing this, but reporting every instance to police. And that's, Lieutenant Galliano highlighted this, is how important it is to report every type of crime you see. Because when police are looking at what crimes are happening, if they see on their statistics that one single address has multiple issues, they're going to say, what's going on here? And then if it gets to the level of, Lieutenant Galliano says, this is a nuclear option of Justice for Neighbors. If the police have tried to do enforcement action and code enforcement has tried to do enforcement action, maybe they can even fine people for things like nuisance buildings or issues happening on a certain property, and no changes are being made, they can take it up to the city attorney's office with Justice for Neighbors to actually crack down on the issues. So in the case of my drug dealing neighbors, the police sometimes, police are understaffed, but they did try to do some undercover operations. They told me they attempted to deliver a package as just like a delivery person to see if one of the gentlemen would let them into their apartment so that maybe they could see what was going on in there, but he would not let them in. So it just came down to contacting the landlord. Thankfully, the landlord was willing to take action when he heard that there could be drug sales happening, and ended up evicting their tenants. So that took care of our problem. But in the midst of that, it was a long process. So if you ever face this, I would just say be prepared for the wheels of justice are sometimes slow. I ended up being in contact with the Justice for Neighbors officer, and she provided me with a questionnaire. I went door to door to my neighbors and had them fill out questionnaires about what they've been seeing at this property over the years. And I heard from people who had lived there longer than me saying, yeah, we've seen stuff there for 10 years, and no one was reporting anything. So I got those questionnaires, turned it in to the officer, and she was able to move forward with contacting the landlord, and that kind of handled the issue. So it could be a drug sales issue, it could be sex trafficking issue. We've had some issues along Freeport within the last, I would say, 6 years, where we've had a couple of massage parlors that have been closed down because there was some shenanigans happening there. So just know that those resources are out there, and I just can't emphasize enough how important it is to report everything that you're seeing. Because we want to make sure that our community is safe, and those who are seeking to do harm to anyone in our community, or make an extra buck by doing harm to people, we want to put an end to that and make sure they know that it's not welcome here.
And we'll make sure at some point to put some links on our website. You know, we have a public safety page, but I have to go and we have to update it a little bit, so we'll make sure to do that. Okay, so next, we have our Traffic Safety Committee. Megan Wicks is going to come and give a little discussion about what's going on since the accident.
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. My name is Megan Wicks. Thanks for giving me the chance to speak on behalf of the Traffic Safety Committee. If you don't know, the Traffic Safety Committee was created to advocate with the City of Sacramento for traffic safe streets throughout the Land Park community. So that's sort of the mission statement, if you didn't know already. I got involved because I am the parent to a toddler. I live on Land Park Drive. I feel like that's enough. That's all I need to say. But obviously I see firsthand the traffic problems that we have in our neighborhood, the erratic driving, the pedestrian issues, the biking issues. I see it from my window every single day. I see it when I cross into the park. I see it at the children's playground. I see it constantly. So I feel as though it's my responsibility to, do this for my child and for all of our children in the neighborhood. It's just sort of unthinkable, the things that are happening, the amount of accidents that we're seeing, and we're going to have some folks share their story just after I give some updates. Okay. As a committee, we have some updates here since we last met, and that is, again, just to remind you, our #1 priority has been solving the collision hotspots in Land Park. There are 4 of them, and if you want more information on how those hotspots were collected, what data we have to support that, and what data we have in general, and it's a lot, please, after the meeting, see our little booth and answer some of the questions we have. We have flyers, how to get involved with our committee. All of that is in the back, and I won't waste your time with it right now because we have those resources available to you. And I want to have time for the Wongs to speak and share their story. And but we're going to be focusing on a combination of immediate fixes and long-term infrastructure solutions. So that's what we do as an organization. We say, how can we fix this right now? This is super dangerous. And also, how can we solve this long-term? Because our roads are old, and there are some major infrastructure problems that we all want to solve. Okay, so that is sort of what we're focusing on. We're in active conversations with Dennis Rogers, who I'm going to point out. Sorry to call you out, but that's the Chief of Staff for Councilmember Jennings, and he's here today. So we are talking to him probably more than he would like, but we are talking to him, talking his ear off. And the more data that we have from you, from where you feel your problem areas are, the more we can provide to him, and we can all speak as a whole, as a unit from the neighborhood. So again, please see our booth in the back afterwards. Just some updates on the accident counts. In the last 12 months, we have at least 12 reported crashes along Land Park Drive alone. Now, those are reported crashes, and a lot of the time, crashes are not reported, so you might see a little fender bender, and that's not going to be reported. So those are 12, one of which happened to, actually not one of which, so the number might be 13. There was an accident this morning on Land Park and 2nd Avenue. I don't know if anybody saw that. That was right around when school was starting. There were bikers riding to school. There were children walking to school, folks walking to the park, walking their dog. And they usually do tend to happen around those times, those kind of busy school hours. So that's 12 reported crashes just this year alone on Land Park Drive. That's 2 of which were rollovers, and I don't know if any of you saw those rollovers in the park, and another one by the school. This is a record amount of crashes, not only on residential streets, but if you want to talk statistics, we can talk about even some of the busier roads like Broadway, Freeport. And that's happening right in our neighborhood. That's 1 crash every 30 days on average, reported crashes. Yikes. Okay. With that being said, I'd like to turn this over to our special guests so that the committee has brought in today. This is going to be Alina, Talon, and Kevin Wong. They're going to share their story of one of the hot spots that we have. This is Sutterville and Mead. So come on up, and we'll give them a round of applause. Welcome, welcome.
Almost 4 years ago, on October 22nd, 2019, I was riding my bike to Cow Middle when I was hit by an SUV driven by a 17-year-old boy going to McClatchy High School. I broke 3 teeth, a femur, my skull, jaw, humerus, and fractured my tibia, and I had a traumatic brain injury. I spent 21 days recovering at the UC Davis Medical Facility. Still, it took months until I could perform well physically, and I still suffer from recurring physical trauma. Obviously, this was not an enjoyable experience for me, the driver, or the passenger in his car, as they both sustained trauma from this experience. Though I received medical, physical, and emotional attention for my traumas, I cannot say the same for the others involved. Having talked to the passenger recently, I know that she has had no one to talk to for the incident for the last 3.5 years. I leave their names out of my statement today because I know how unpleasant it is to have an accident be the first thing people think about when your name is mentioned. According to local residents of this area, this is not an uncommon occurrence. The official police report says that neither the driver nor his passenger saw the pedestrian crossing lights. The lights at the Sutterville-Mead intersection are formally called solar-powered rectangular rapid flashing beacons, which is a very long and unnecessary way to say that they don't actually work. These lights are attached to poles coming straight out of the sidewalk, so drivers cannot see them without looking away from the road. If you've ever traveled east at 7 in the morning, you know you can't see anything, especially if the lights are the same color as the sun, like the lights of this intersection. My parents have always allowed me to be fairly independent. I've been able to get myself to school without any assistance since 4th grade. Though this independence was the reason I was biking, it was not the reason I got hit. With roads as dangerous as the ones in Sacramento, children are not safe traveling to school, whether on foot, bike, or even car. By helping secure the safety of fixing infrastructure in both the Sutterville-Mead intersection and other areas on school routes, we can create a safer environment for children traveling both to and from school. This will help protect and make it commuting easier for children like me, supporting teenagers learning to drive, one still new to their license, like the boy who hit me, and even adults who have been driving for years. This will not only help protect children from physical harm, but also the mental harm of being in a vehicle that struck a 12-year-old girl. Yesterday, there was a collision in front of my school right before school. I go to McClatchy, so it was on Freeport. These kinds of problems are barely being fixed, which is why we need to shout louder in order for our government to hear us. The band-aids they're trying to use are not working. Sacramento is moving too fast and needs to slow down. As a 16-year-old learning to drive, going as fast as the traffic around me is one of the most difficult things I'm trying to learn, and I can't seem to figure it out. Why would I go 50 miles per hour on Freeport if there are people's lives at stake around me? This isn't a freeway. It seems like a lack of consideration for the lives around me, especially when there are bikes sharing the road who can't even bike in their own lane. The fact that dead leaves and lifeless cars hold more value than bikers is offensive. We cannot live in this kind of horror show anymore, and the only way we can fix it is by raising our voices to change the road, because no one is going to do it unless we do.
Get involved with the Traffic Safety Committee. We have resources to do so in the back, and thank you for your time.
Thanks for that. That was wonderful. Okay, on our agenda, we're just changing a little bit. We're going to have Dennis Rogers come and speak next, and then we'll have Ron Lithicum. So Dennis, come on up. Dennis is Rick Jennings' Chief of Staff, District 7.
So, can you hear me if I don't use the mic?
Yes.
Okay, cool. That just makes it a lot easier. If I start coughing, you know, I have allergies, and I'm fighting with my insurance company to get the formula right, so I apologize. I left my cough drops on my desk when I left the office today. So don't be concerned. My wife is an anatomy and physiology professor, so you know I kind of understand what I'm supposed to do and what I'm not supposed to do. I really am going to just touch on a few things, and then I want to leave time for questions, and you know I'll answer everything that I can. If I don't know the answer, I'll find the answer and get back to Chris. The first thing I wanted to start with, and they're kind of the two things are kind of combined. One is the city's response to homelessness. Big issue, difficult thing. Unfortunately, the city, we're a lawsuit magnet, and so the homeless union sues us on a regular basis. And the judge sided with them and actually precluded us from doing any compliance efforts whatsoever related to homelessness for basically the entire month of August. So I only just say that as kind of a framework for the discussion, because it's not the desire that we don't want to be able to try and clean things up. It's just sometimes we have some lawsuits that make it a little more difficult for us to bring people into compliance. My boss is a member of St. Paul Missionary Baptist Church, and he and Mrs. Jennings for 10 years ran the Winter Sanctuary for the church. How many are familiar with that program, Winter Sanctuary? So the Winter Sanctuary is 30 organizations get together, and they offer space for 100 people during the winter time to come in out of the elements. They stay up with them all night, and they do that for basically the entire winter time. And Mr. and Mrs. Jennings ran that program with St. Paul Missionary Baptist Church for 10 years. The only reason I mention this is it's very, very illustrative and instructive for kind of the way in which Mr. Jennings is looking at what is necessary for the next steps in homelessness. We need to be able to provide more shelter, and I'm not talking about the city, I'm talking about we, a society, because in reality, the number one provider of health and human services is the county, and they're the ones that were actually created by the state and funded by the federal, state, and governments. Your property taxes within the city of Sacramento, as well as sales tax to be able to do that work. But when I say we need to do that, I just want to set that off to the side. We do need to do that. But what Rick saw over and over and over again was the same people coming back month after month, year after year. The same people he saw on day one when they started it were the same people he saw on the third month in year 7. And one of the things that he is very committed to is trying to understand how we can get a disruptive action to help people that might have disordered thinking, might have mental health problems, might have narcotics abuse because they're using that to self-medicate, to try and disrupt that behavior so that they might be more open to services. I've met with Mario Lara today earlier. He's the assistant city manager that has functional responsibility for this area. And he told me when we go to a camp and we clear a camp, we have a success rate of placing someone, even if we have spaces available, we have a success rate of people accepting the services of between 5 and 10%. So that means every day, 90% of the folks that are homeless are not willing to accept the services. The only reason I say that is that Mr. Jennings believes that we have to have compliance. We have to be able to do camp management, clean things up, and we have to be able to provide some sort of disruptive activity to folks that are in a spin cycle, right? They're just going to live the same life they're going to live day after day, month after month. So back on August 1st, he led the charge, and the council did something that's very important, and I want to read this part to you because I think it's very instructive, is they passed 7-2 a new protocol on compliance for the ordinances that we have on the books that are legal under Martin v. Boise, right? Are you all familiar with Martin v. Boise? Do you know what that is? I don't see enough. Martin v. Boise was a federal appellate court that said you can't tell people they can't camp in public if there's no shelter available, in kind of a nutshell. And so what was really important about that decision on 7-2 is this sentence. So we took the protocols of the city staff and all the ordinances and actually voted on an agendized item at the city council, 7-2 in favor. And why this is important is that's clear direction to city staff of what they want the council to do. If an individual council member doesn't agree with that, they need to re-agendize the item and find 4 other votes to overturn it. Otherwise, this is the policy direction of the city. And I think that's incredibly important because it took the individual kind of back and forth out of it, and now the staff has clear direction. And this is from the protocol. Once an encampment or call for service is assigned rapid response strategy, the call will be closed only when compliance is achieved. That's a distinct difference from what we used to do, which we did not view the closing of the case being compliance with our ordinances. It was, could we find them shelter? Are they being taken care of? Right? And it's not trying to be harsh, it's to accept the fact that on average, 9 out of 10 people don't accept services, but they're impacting everyone else when that happens. So we try and give them services, but if they're unwilling to do that, our number one priority is having them come into compliance. Does anyone have any questions on that?
I just want to know what that looks like.
So, for example, if they're on critical infrastructure, they have to get up and leave. If they're blocking the sidewalk, they have to clean up everything. And what happens is then we use another ordinance, which is the unlawful storage of private property on public property, and we cull it down to where they don't have as much junk around. You clean it up, and then the sidewalk's clear.
And that's going to be enforced?
It's starting to, as soon as the injunction was raised last week, we started an enforcement on Tuesday of this week. Yes, ma'am.
So, I'm not sure if you said this, but so if people are along sidewalks, so they have to be moved, but you don't have a shelter for them, that federal legislation doesn't supersede?
Okay, so we can clear the sidewalk, right? And using ADA laws, and there has to be a path of travel for someone who might be disabled. And that's what we hang our hat on that.
Okay.
And then so they have to clean up everything, and they have to move to a different place, or get rid of a bunch of the stuff and have a smaller footprint from their encampment, so that people can do that. So on WX, when we cleaned up, don't quote me on exactly, I think they picked up like 8 or 9 tons of trash when they cleaned up. Right? Yes, ma'am.
If sometimes when I'm driving, I see people like have an open flame. They're like underneath they might be somewhere that I think is going to come into flame. So I don't know if I'm supposed to call 311, the non-emergency number, or just ignore it. What am I supposed to do? 'Cause I'm worried about fires in particular.
Absolutely. And so how I would answer that is, my response that I've been told to give is empower you to use your good judgment to either dial 911 or the non-emergency.
Okay.
Do you think it's going to be an emergency where we need to get a firefighter out there right there? Or can you call non-emergency and say, here's what's going on, and therefore they can get to it in just a little bit?
That's the 808-5471 number.
Yeah, but not 311. In that instance, not 311.
Right, because 311 is a little longer, like 1 or 2 days.
No. Unfortunately, probably longer than that.
Okay.
Yeah, it just depends.
All right.
But what's important though is.
But if I think the fence is about to catch on fire, or the building next door is about to catch on fire,
911.
let's go for 911 instead
Absolutely.
of the non-emergency number.
And so then the other thing that I'll tell you is we still want you to dial 311 because, as like Lieutenant Galliano said, it's really important that we get as much data as possible because staff has to prioritize all of this, and they do it based upon data. the number of 311 calls, the number of complaints, the number of problems that are happening. That happens on traffic safety, you know, all of those things. Allocation of resources is database. So if you can do that, it's really good. If you go onto the website and ask for the email address of 311, you can also just send in an email, and they'll automatically do it, so you don't have to wait on hold.
Okay.
Okay? Yes, sir. And then you, and then Becker.
So I understand one of the things that's required in citing new sites is a good neighbor policy.
Mm-hmm.
In the X Street site, it just seems like the good neighbor policy was never enforced. Is that
Absolutely.
camping is always allowed around it?
You're absolutely right.
And will the city manager
Yes.
allow enforcement of that?
So in this, we included a good neighbor policy of being able to have, basically speaking, just making sure that it's cleared about 3 blocks around, so that you don't have the impact, right? Because what they do is they camp on the outside, and then the drug dealers come because they can do this and they did, right? You know, all of this is going to take a little bit of time because we passed the thing on 8/1, and then the judge said no enforcement a couple of days later. Like I think maybe like 4 or 5 days. So it does that. And you were next.
Yes, today I actually witnessed one of our resident homeless women in the park backing up to a tree and relieving herself.
Yeah,
so
that's not acceptable.
Believe me. I did that loop around with my phone, driving, trying to get footage, but I like to call 311. I don't know, and they called me back because it was like a 20-minute wait. But I gave a description and talked to a really nice guy named Brett. But I mean, you know, the park was completely crowded with grandparents and little kids, and this.
Absolutely.
It's just.
Yeah, all I can tell you is what we're trying to do, and so we got the 7-2 vote. It included an authorization of the city manager to expend money in overtime to try and address this issue.
Yeah.
Right? So it's changing, right?
Right.
That for the longest time, even when we initially did the sidewalk ordinance had a companion resolution associated with it, saying that we needed to give them 8 hours notice before we would do the enforcement. And the problem with that is, the people who would be doing the notice have an 8-hour shift.
Right. So what's the difference?
So it didn't work, right?
Right.
So we're actually gonna be rescinding that, and we're gonna be looking at some other things in which we can do that. But as we go forward, as we move forward, we have a vote, 7-2 on the council, saying compliance is the #1 issue.
Right.
You need to do that, right? It will take us a period of time, but that's one of the things that was really important to my boss. So 4 months ago, when the city came at the first public discussion after the county city Measure O partnership was officially signed and put in place, we had the first kind of discussion of that. Rick brought up the idea of compliance. A month, and everyone agreed we need to have the discussion. A month later, he partnered with the District 1 and District 3 council members, and we brought a package together that changed all of this, working with staff. Everyone kind of agreed to the framework. The following month, we actually passed the resolution. It was agendized, voted on, and now is the policy that staff is instructed to follow because it was an agendized and vote of the council. So that's kind of the next steps.
Right.
That's kind of what we're going to do next, is try and start that process. As soon as the injunction was lifted, we went right into the priorities and starting to do the enforcement now.
Right.
And we're still trying to find space for folks. But we really want the county to do that because their budget's like 8 times our size. And they have Health and Human Services money when we want them to provide that, but we want to work in partnership with them.
Who were the two no-go?
Yes.
So what I would rather do, just kind of trying to do this, I'd rather focus on the 7 yes votes, because that was a clear supermajority, right? It wasn't a 5-4 split, it was 7-2, clear majority. And you were next, John.
Oh, yeah. Am I correct in understanding that there's a requirement for compliance with services as well? I know you're talking about compliance with things like the sidewalk ordinance, but is there also a requirement for compliance with services?
So
with
no.
that recent policy?
No, we can't do that. So we can't force them to accept services.
Okay, that was it.
So the governor sponsors something called the care courts, and I think there are 4 or 5 courts that they're gonna they're gonna pilot, Sacramento's not one of them, where they will look to adjudicate someone who clearly can't make decisions for themselves, and the state will step in and say, you have to accept services.
Okay.
But we're not part of that yet.
Okay.
And there was someone back here.
Yeah, I wanted to tag on with that because I've also seen people defecating in places and adjacent to my home as well. So my concern is the sanitation.
Yes, ma'am.
Is the city doing anything to sanitize the area, whether they're, defecating on the sidewalk or in the storm drains, and what sort of measures are being taken? Just even if you can't remove them from their current location, what can we do about sanitation?
So I'll answer two ways.
Okay.
Two things, right? The first is yes, when we do an enforcement action, a compliance action, they clean up afterwards, including sanitization, power washing, all that stuff. The second is that public health issue you just articulated is one of the strongest cases that we have for greater compliance. And that's something that we know is important. Now, there's someone right over here. Someone raised their hand. I think, ma'am, you with the glasses, right? Yeah, you
I
raised
wanted
your
to
hand.
know who the two no votes were.
Again, so what I'd rather do is I'd rather focus on the 7 that we got, right? So.
Is there, I never have understood why we can't have public porta potties or toilets where we know people are congregating. Can you help us understand?
Yeah, some places have that, but again, what we have to do is we have to figure out how that's gonna be allocated, right? And so the city, for the longest time, so let's just take Miller Park, for example. So we're running that right now. It costs us $3.5 million a year. It's 120 spaces.
Yeah.
Right? So we don't have the capacity to fund something at that level. And so that the import of the city-county partnership is it's a legally binding document, and the county's responsible for those things. So we work with the county to address those issues.
One of the reasons I'm bringing it up, because I have some exposure through a church nonprofit with programs that provided mobile showers and porta potties where homeless people were incorporated in the process of keeping things clean and managing it. So you're both dealing with the issue that everybody is frustrated about, but you're also giving people the experience of how to do.
So the city's doing that currently in North Sacramento at a place called Camp Resolution. So we're piloting our first one, learning what works and we're learning what doesn't work. And the 5-4 vote that accompanied the 7-2 vote was to be able to start citing some of those on government-owned property, that we would have the ability to try and do exactly that, which is the first step. Right, that's the first step. Can we get someone into a place where they might be able to stabilize, receive some level of service where they get enough stability, where they can start making better decisions, and then move them on to the next one? Let's see, there was someone, yes, and then you're next, sir.
So it's my understanding that the mayor has now delegated the fire department to be taking care of a lot of this stuff. And so if a 311 call or a non-emergency call specifically to the homeless, are they being dispatched out first now?
So that is his proposal. It has not come before the council yet.
Okay.
So it is strictly a proposal. They're setting that up. It's an incident command structure, is what that is called. The reason why we're doing the fire department is they have lots and lots of experience doing exactly that. The Department of Community Response used to be the lead. They don't. So we're hoping that this is going to work a little bit better, and it's worked in other places. That will
When's that
contribute.
going in front of the council?
I don't know.
You don't know. And then what's what on your data, what is the turnaround time by calling something in to 311 right now?
I don't know the answer to that, primarily because of the fact that we haven't been doing anything for last month. I mean, we were precluded from doing anything at all for the entire month, including going into a park or critical infrastructure. We were actually told, which I don't understand how a judge would say, no, it's not okay to get people away from critical infrastructure. There's a reason why it's called critical infrastructure, but they didn't do that. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I think you hear the frustration in the
Absolutely.
room about what's going on, because what happens is when you, even under the compliance that you discussed, the 7-2 vote, they just move down the street.
Yes.
So that's defined as compliance, and now that's over. So what you need is a situation where they go where they don't come back down the street or in front of your house. And in the Miller Park situation that the city is sponsoring, they've got, I thought it was 60 tents, but maybe it's more. But the city manager says each tent costs the city $60,000 a year. 1/10, $60,000 a year.
And so the tent doesn't do that, it's all the ancillary services, which is why we have the city-county partnership, so that the county start providing the mental health, the narcotics intervention, all of those things. We can't afford to fund that level anymore, which is why we had the city-county partnership be a part of it.
Agreed, but that's the point, and Dennis is one of the good guys, so I'm sorry if it's coming off like you're not a good guy, but you are a good guy.
So hold on, but what I want to say is I want to acknowledge your frustration shared by my boss. He gets it, right? One of the things that he's trying to do is move the posture of the city in a direction that he's more comfortable with, which is greater compliance, greater protection of your quality of life. And I'm going to talk about Target in a little bit, and I'll tell you how that is connected. But I want to acknowledge that it is not unnoticed. And one of the people that we get the most information from is Mrs. Jennings. I get more emails from Mrs. Jennings about this stuff than anybody, and I can guarantee you, I don't want her mad at me.
So the point is, the homeless have the option to set up in front of your house or by the post office. The city has given them the option to do that. And the change that was represented by the 5-4 vote is the safe grounds concept, where you move the homeless person to the city established lot in a safe ground.
If they accept.
No, well, that's the problem.
That is the problem. We cannot, if you were homeless, I cannot come as a government official and pick you up by the hand and drag you over here and make you go there. That's why the governor started the character work.
But Dennis, the point is, if you set up a safe grounds location, and instead of being $60,000 a pop, it's $5,000 a pop. Then you say to the homeless person, it's against the law for you illegally to camp on the sidewalk, which it is. So you have to go here.
Which is what we do now, in the compliance issue, and that's why only between 5 and 10% of the people we contact accept that service.
And then after they don't do that the first time, maybe on the third time, then you subject them to arrest, which is what the DA Ho is talking about.
Yeah,
and at that point, you can compel them to go there, and so they're no longer at the post office. They're no longer in front of your house.
So it's not 3, it's 10. Because I know the program. It's exactly what it is. And then if they do that, then he has the ability to say, you can accept jail, or we can put you into a program, and they have a program for him. Rick is very supportive of that.
Yes.
And so we'll be able to do that. The answer to your frustration, though, is a no daytime camping ordinance, which is Rick is in support of. Because then what happens, and that's really a camp management issue, that means that when you wake up in the morning, you're under the Boise Martin, allowed to camp on public property at night, but at 6 o'clock in the morning, everything you have to be able to pack up and go. So you're not gonna see a tent with mountains of half cut up bikes and trash and everything else, right? So that's the answer, because then what you're able to do is you're able to say, okay, the federal government says that you're allowed to camp. We'll stipulate to that. But during the day, whatever you have to pick up, and if you have other life essentials you can't, we're going to provide storage for you, because that's what you have to do to stay within framework of the.
I'll be quiet, but the key is to drive down that cost per tent from $60,000 to $5,000 or $2,000. Then you'll have a spot for them instead of in front of the post office.
Absolutely, 100% agree with you. Yes, ma'am.
I kind of on this, but I went down to Miller Park to look to kind of see what was going on there, and those tents that are right along the river, I don't know how many are being occupied or how many of those 15 trailers are actually occupied, but then there's a huge encampment right outside of there. Like it's right, it's
so
like
totally get what you're saying.
How
Because we can't compel them to go in there, but we'll have to come in there and clean it up. And by the 7-2 vote, and we're hoping that we can get another 7-2, 6-3, even a 5-4 vote on the no daytime camping ordinance, then we can finally get to that point. The main thing that was really important about the 7-2 vote is it included an authorization to spend what was necessary in overtime to make a difference.
Dennis?
So it's the resources.
How can we help as a community when you're trying to get these votes? What is it that we need to pay attention to? And
So the number one issue that you can do is email, call 311 as often as you possibly can about this stuff. Because that's the data that we're using, and that's the data that we use when we talk to Rick's colleagues about why this is an issue. Yes, ma'am.
How many homeless people are currently in the county or in the city?
County, probably about 9,000
Oh, that's all?
total, yeah, countywide, somewhere around there. And there's another 3,000, and I'll come to you, I forgot you and I apologize. About 3,000 are homeless, but they're housed, meaning they're in shelter.
Well, I'm just wondering about resources, like if you're moving people, do they really have the resources if they have all their stuff and you say you need to move? Who's gonna enforce that?
We will. But we will be required under the rubric of legality that we'll be able to have to transport them to the storage facility. They'll go through the stuff that they need to, we'll have to store it. And then they'll have the smaller stuff that they can do when they are just around, right? And it's an imperfect thing, but in other and so let me just use this example. We have a no daytime camping ban around City Hall, and we have it around now the county courthouse and around the DA's office. That's all clean. It works. We just want to do it citywide.
We can
Yes,
take
sir.
2 more questions.
You've been waiting, and I apologize for skipping you over.
No problem. First of all, really appreciate you coming and sharing all this information.
My pleasure.
Two-part question. One, I'm familiar with Measure O.
Uh-huh.
Can you clarify what exactly is different in the 7-2 vote that the council passed versus Measure O? What was the add-on, or what was the differentiation between that and what Measure O authorized? So that's question number one.
Okay.
Question number two. If compliance is the number one measurement, this is somewhat of a fall under the gentleman's comments here. Can you just clarify how you get to compliance? Meaning, if someone does not comply, one, what is the definition of compliance, and what happens if someone does not comply?
So,
what is the follow-on action?
So let me take that first and I'll come back to Measure O. The first is we have found that we get 99.9% compliance with whatever the ordinance states. So if it's the sidewalk ordinance, they have to provide, I think it's 4 feet of unobstructed travel. We also have an ordinance that put the storage of private property on public. We go in there and start throwing stuff away and getting rid of trash and cleaning it up and culling it down, right? We're able to get 99.9% of the time we get compliance voluntarily just by working with them. The next step is, if not, then we start looking at citations and potentially arrests, depending upon how many citations we get. And the city council has a majority of folks that will go to that point if necessary, but we haven't had to do that yet for the compliance of the existing ordinances because we get such a high level of voluntary compliance. Measure O.
Actually, can I just add a follow-on to that?
Yeah.
So, in terms of compliance, so I'm hearing you say single incident, meaning they comply today, 4 days later.
Correct.
That's a separate incident that is not in any way correlated or added on to the first incident, right?
It is, and then I know a lot, there's something called Sacramento Steps Forward, and they have, the city's giving them $2 million, the county's giving them $2 million, they're doing an integrated intake system that tracks all of that stuff and also tracks beds, and we're hoping that it's gonna be fully operational by the fall. All of those things will be there, and then that's the stacking that will happen that we talked about with 10 right? Then if you track all of that and you stack all of those things, then if they're continually doing the same violation just in a different place, you stack those on top of each other, and then you can do a greater enforcement.
Okay, thank you.
So Dennis, you had one more person, right? And then you can move on to the target then,
Yeah.
right?
Yes, ma'am.
I would really like to know how much this is costing us to clean up the homeless, provide services.
Lots and lots of millions. It is, and part of the problem is that the contractor we have for Rinse and Clean, we have, I think, a $4.5 to $5 million annual contract with them. What we have to do is hire someone with their expertise, because there are issues when you clean up in homeless camps. Needles, feces, biohazards, all that stuff. So it's not like hiring, Fred's, landscape. And so if we get to a point where we can have a no daytime camping ordinance, he thinks that what will happen, so you're all familiar with the bell curve, right? The bell curve, when you look at data analysis. We call it the plateau curve. So what will happen is you'll get a lot of work, it'll come up, it'll plateau, and then the back end will start going down again because people will realize we're gonna come after you, you're not allowed to be there. We have to stick to it, which is why it was so important to get the 7-2 vote, because then the city staff knows they're empowered to continue to do this, and they're resourced to do this, so that, you know, people are trained and understand that we're doing things a little bit different.
But along her lines, how come most of the homeless people that are here are not from Sacramento or not even California? How can that be allowed?
That's not true.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
So my understanding of the data that I've been told is that the vast majority of people are from the Sacramento region.
Well, that's in dispute.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
tonight's not the night, but I'll tell you what, I mean, we are talking about having a discussion on having this be a theme and in a future meeting where we can delve a little deeper, and we'll have professional speakers come and tell you what's going on and have some more data, okay?
So Chris, what I'll do is, the next time you and I get together, we can map that out, but I'll also ask for the data, and then I'll just share the data that's shared with us,
Okay.
right? And so then that way you guys can look at it and make up your own minds, right? Because we're not out there collecting the data. Now,
What was the vote? Is it 2 to 7? What was the vote? Second Google. What was the vote on?
the vote was on, it was item number 4 on 8-1 on the 12:30 council agenda, and that was the compliance issue. And so that took the actual protocols we had and changed them to be have compliance is the issue, and then all the other stuff that was there.
Item 4, August 1st vote. Thank you.
Yeah, 12:30. Not that I have it memorized.
I
So now let me wrap this into the next thing I wanted to talk about. Target, right? Target is. I'll be careful with how I say this. Target, because of the situation that we're in, enables a lot of this behavior. Not because they're bad people per se, but because of the fact that you have people that are coming in from around the area and they can grab something, right? And they can steal some food. So, show of hands. Who thinks they know one of the number 1 targets that are the most profitable to be stolen?
Well, I know that the Broadway and Riverside Target has the most theft of any Target in the area.
Yeah. No, but I mean, what individual item? So what does
things
someone?
that are already locked up or things that are not locked up.
I don't know.
They now lock up a lot.
So the number 1 issue, Legos.
No.
And why do you think Legos are the number 1 issue? Because they're super expensive. So what happens is, I'm an enterprising young criminal. I see a couple of homeless folks that would like a fix. I say, here's the stuff I want you to go steal. I give them each $10. They're happy because they get their fix. Then I go sell them on eBay or Craigslist for 50% of the cost that you would buy in retail, and I'm making money hand over fist, right? That's just an example of what happens, right? So we met with Target last Friday. We had all of their brass from the Western United States, including their government affairs director that's in charge of California, Nevada, Arizona, and Hawaii. And they took seriously our meeting with them, because the opening, when I talked with them originally in June, was the JFN. We have a drafted letter from our city attorney's office saying you guys need to behave differently or we're coming. My boss likes to create partnerships, so we met with them. They had 9 or 11 people there. We had a couple of folks. And we just showed them data. The person who showed them the data was actually Lieutenant Galliano, because that's one of the things we're trying to look at. Target is orders of magnitude a crime magnet. So the second highest amount of police reports that are filed is the Children's Receiving Home. Not because there's an issue going on, but because every time they have a kid run away, they have to file a report by regulation. The next one down, so Target's like at 750, Children's Receiving Home is like 350, the next one down is like 120. Like, it's not even close, right? They're taking it seriously, and I have some good news I'll tell you in a moment. But what Lieutenant Galliano showed them was, here's Target, and here's 3 or 4 other really high crime nodes. They had 1 or 2 little blue dots, which are additional crime. Target had like 50. all those folks that are homeless that are coming in and stealing stuff. So what we asked, how many have heard the term SEPTED? You heard that? So what is SEPTED?
Crime prevention through environmental design.
Target agreed to do one. It will be crime prevention through environmental design. So it's a data-driven analysis of your facility, and you make recommendations on things that will make it easier to deter crime rather than have to go into the compliance mode. Because we're not going to arrest our way out of this issue. We have to stop it before it starts. So I talked to Alex Randolph, so he's our government affairs guy. He called me today. We met with him last Friday, and we got approval to do a SEPTED today. Now, how many of you have dealt with a Fortune 100 company and how it's like a battleship, right? So they agreed to do that. The import of that is that that's the first ask we had because we're trying to do that. So they're agreeing to do it, which was very, very beneficial because we're hoping by going through that process that they will make changes that will create greater deterrence, and therefore all the blue dots that are around there will start to dissipate, right? So on Broadway, that's our first focus is Target. Our second focus is going to be Walgreens.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Same issue. I've been told their corporate culture is just a little bit different, so I don't know how that's going to work. But the reason why we're excited about Target is that they actually are saying we want to work with you, and we get that there's an issue. How can we work cooperatively? Which is a big change from where they were before.
So,
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, I'm a business owner. What exactly does Target do wrong? So I love going to Target. We all love going to Target for years.
Absolutely.
The way I'm hearing this spoken is that Target's the problem. What did they do wrong? They did nothing wrong. So what we have just done, and I understand we're trying to make the problem better, we have incurred upon Target a significant incremental cost burden.
Correct. Absolutely.
Right? And
Absolutely.
they won't stick around and lose money. No private business should stick around in a neighborhood and lose money. So I'm just calling this out. Like, we're all excited. Oh, we just have Target going. Redesign their whole store. Like that.
So I'm going to correct you. It's not. It's not. That's a factual inaccuracy. It's not just redesigning their entire store. It's going in and putting in place things that deter people from stealing stuff, and going out and fencing it.
Yes, all of that comes with a cost.
It does, and all of that comes with a cost to the city and this community on quality of life.
Customer experience and to optimize their profit. We are going to, on top of all the problems they already have, all the things they're locking up, all the extra costs they're incurring, I'm amazed they're still here.
So I know.
Now I added another word, and I love Target for doing this, but I just want to call out, and I appreciate what you guys are doing, but there is going to probably be a ripple effect here. And that ripple effect is at some point they will throw up their hands and walk away.
So I was in the meeting, and I had the discussion with the folks, and I was the one who had directly talked to them. They were excited to be able to do this because they want to be a part of the solution. They want deterrence as well. Because I know exactly what their loss is in that store over the last 5 years on an annualized basis. We agreed that we wouldn't share that. I know exactly how much it is, and they want that deterrence to happen. We're not coming in and forcing them to do this. We asked voluntarily for them to do a SEPTED because we have crime data that shows that there are people that are getting accosted, there are people that are getting their cars broken into, and there's drug dealing and problems because of the way Target deals with itself.
Which has changed over the years.
Yeah. And so they're better, and they're working with us. And we didn't come in with them and start off with the JFN and hammer them legally. We came in with a partnership first and said, here's the first step, let's try and do this. So we're balancing it, but the status quo is unacceptable because it enables all the drug dealing and everything else on the WX. And my boss won't stand for it. And it's going to change one way or another.
Absolutely.
I'm wondering if that includes them pressing charges more than they have.
So they can press charges. That's a combination of the police department and the DA, and that's going to be all part of the discussion relative to SEPTED. The SEPTED will not be a public document, because one of the things we can't do, and there's actually a government code that says it can't be, because they have safety measures that they're doing, and they don't want it exposed to everyone. So that's part of it. I think there's someone over here.
Can I ask a part B to that?
Yeah.
Some of their problem is, I noticed lighting on 13th, that's right where the express exit is. The no-pay express exit. And they just run right by the elephant tram and into darkness. Is there any, who would you go to try to get some lighting in that area?
So they're going to go there, but one of the things that's really unique about SEPTED is that it also puts an obligation on the city. So we're going to look at the lighting around that area, and it's going to be part of the Broadway Complete Streets. We're going to have to do our part to make sure that we're a partner in this, right? It's not just you, it's us, and that's how we're approaching it. I think there was someone else. Yes, ma'am.
I was just going to say to your point, you know, as for Target and for all the businesses, they're invested in getting these crimes down, because you can't ask a 15-year-old kid who's operating the cashier, the cashier, to stop crime in progress, and they've stopped doing that because the work comp injury far exceeds the theft that's being done. You can steal $500 worth of Legos, but if you have a traumatic head injury from a kid trying to stop a crime, that could be hundreds of thousands.
So Target has a corporate policy, has a no hands-on policy. They will not physically intervene, and the people that were there told us they have about a 30 to 35% success rate of talking someone who's done a criminal activity back into the store so they can deal with it, which is actually fairly good if you're just talking. I'd actually like to hire that person as a salesperson.
That's exactly what I mean, is that they had to do that because of the cost
Correct.
to the business. So Walgreens, Target, all these businesses, they've had to stop their security from intervening, which has now caused part of these problems. Like, I've been in Target and seen kids at Christmas come in, and then 20 kids went running out, all with armfuls full of stuff.
Happens all the time. It happens for iPhones and everything else. That's why we're working on deterrence with them. That's why we want to do the study with them. And it's database based upon experience. Target actually just got their first employee in asset protection qualified for SEPTED. So this is something that their corporate policy they're going to do, because they want to do the same thing. If they can stop that, that'll work. So I have to be careful with how I say this. So the data that was presented to us is the huge amount of crime that happens is in a relatively small number of people, right? So one of the things that they're focused on is how do you make a deterrence so that it's not profitable for those same people to come back all the time?
Right.
And then how do you stack things like the DA was talking about, and how do you do those? And I can't say exactly everything that we learned, but they are very sophisticated in this. They just need our partnership. And so that's one of the things that we're going to do with our city attorney as well as our PD. And we're going to have conversations with the DA about how we can be helpful in bridging that relationship. But the deterrence is the number one issue, and the partnership has to be there. And the city will have to be able to come in and say, if Target comes in and says, okay, we're going to do this stuff, but the SEPTED said, like you said, that there's the darkness over here, and the city's going to have to find money to put some lights up there. Because we have to be a partner in it too. We can't just expect them to do that, but our focus is not on compliance. It's not arresting our way out of this. It's how do you deter it.
So Dennis, we just have a couple more minutes.
Okay.
I just have one comment about that. It's just about that, like we were talking about, every single person in this room has a responsibility to report to 311, call 911, call non-emergency when you see something. Every single person that's here tonight should be going to Target.com and going to customer service and writing something online to them. And I know that you think, oh, what's a small number of people going to do to make a difference? If they all of a sudden, in a matter of a month's time, get every single person and complaining about the same store, all that's doing is supporting Rick Jennings' team, and they have the data to say, all these people have been reporting this, and it's, I mean, they do want to stay here in Woodland Park because it's a very profitable store. So it's upon us to help as well. So report to 311, report to Target, report to Walgreens. It takes a couple of minutes.
So I'm gonna get to traffic safety. I'm gonna say one more thing about Target. To tell you how sophisticated they are, they actually are trying to figure out ways, even though people want to use it, to discourage people from using self-checkout. They actually are proud that they're around 85% of people going to lanes, because they find there's a lot less crime, there's a lot less shrinkage if you're going through that stuff, even though everybody wants it, right? So much, yes, well, the stats show it. But my point to you is they're sophisticated, they're trying everything they possibly can. Okay? So the last thing, I'll do two things. Sideshows, I can come back and talk about it again. My boss is leading the charge on an integrated policy that involves video and hardening center lines, and I can come back to that. On traffic safety, I was able to talk to the transportation director, and he's agreed to sit down with me to talk about new studies at 2nd, 11th, Meade, and Sutterville, and then also Swanston, which are the 4 areas that the Traffic Safety Committee have been talking about on the immediate stuff. And so we're going to sit down to see what are the things we can do.
Wait, what are the 4 areas again?
Land Park Drive, the intersection of 2nd Ave and 11th, those 2 intersections. Riverside and Swanston, Sutterville and Meade, right? I don't know what's going to come out of this, but we're going to try and figure out what we can do to move forward on traffic calming.
Riverside and 11th?
I'm sorry?
What about Riverside and 11th?
So we worked with the Transportation the Safety Committee, and those are the top 4 ones. Yeah, and those are the top 4 ones that they asked, because I met with them last week, I think. It was the week before, I can't remember. But those are the 4 that we're going to try and get movement on immediately to be able to do that. Yes, ma'am.
At some level, you have to say that Freeport is a commercial corridor, completely. Riverside, to a lesser degree, is a commercial corridor. And putting that bike lane over on Freeport and dropping it to 1 lane, now we're told that Land Park, which is a residential street from Sutterville all the way to Broadway, now needs to be a thoroughfare for the city. And I think that's wrong, and I think Rick Jennings needs to push back on that. Because the city has turned Land Park into a commercial corridor or a commuting corridor when it is not that
Land
corridor.
Park, Riverside, Franklin, both of those have spillover. They came from the changes at Freeport.
Yeah, and that is a total commercial corridor. And if you go there and you sit there all day, how many bicycles are you going to see on that huge amount of space that you've devoted to that bike lane? I'm so angry about it, and now we have all these new families in Land Park. They're not oldsters, but the new families all have little children, and they bought all those houses on Land Park Drive because they were the ones that turned over first. And I don't want to have to read about one of my neighbor's kids getting run over.
Absolutely.
I think that's just, it takes 1 day to put a stop sign up at 11th Avenue. One day.
Well,
it costs almost nothing. You're spending $60,000 per tent at Miller Park, and you can't spend the money to put one stop sign in at one intersection where almost everyone in this room has witnessed a nasty crash.
Absolutely. And so, may I answer why that's not possible? I understand the emotion that you have.
I don't believe it's not possible. I think that you're saying it's not possible is your belief, but it is not impossible.
Why we're redoing the studies is currently there is a traffic safety analysis that shows that based upon state law and policy, there isn't a warrant to be able to put a stop sign in. Okay, that's why we're coming back and trying to look at it differently, and that's why we've asked him to be able to do that. My boss believes that something like that should happen.
I only know is my kid goes to USF in San Francisco. There's Masonic, there's Turk, there's Fulton. Those are commercial streets they have. And then there's Golden Gate, and they have a stop sign at every single corner, every single block on Golden Gate. They closed down part of Golden Gate for the pandemic so people could walk there, and they've never reopened it except to local traffic. I don't know what state law you're saying won't allow us to do anything else. We're doing things all the time that we let people sue the city for. Why can't we put a stop sign and let somebody sue us for?
So I agree with you, and that's what we're trying to do. And in fact, what I've done is I've gone to other jurisdictions in this region, and I've gone back on Google Maps and taken screen captures and said, this used to not be a stop sign. This is a stop sign. It looks exactly like this. It has the same traffic count. Why can't we do the same thing that jurisdiction X did? And that's the process that we're going through. So one of the difficulties that we face, and this is just the reality of what it is, and I'm not making excuses, I'm just trying to be factual with you. I want to say from the outset, my boss agrees with traffic calming, including stop signs, whatever it takes to slow down the traffic. I think I've shared before that he was frustrated with everything that happened in Pocket Greenhaven and created a whole Pocket Greenhaven traffic study to be able to address all these things on a comprehensive basis so you don't have the balloon problem, right? You're familiar with that? where you squeeze the balloon and something comes out. So we want to be able to do that. So we're working as hard as we can to try and change that, but we don't have the capacity to just say thou shalt, right? That's not how the system works. But we can persuade, we can talk. We've got agreement from the transportation director to look at the studies and further and see what are the things that we can do, including holdouts, roundabouts, stop signs, whatever it might be. And he won't stop until we gain success.
Dennis,
Yeah.
we need to move on to our next speaker.
Sure.
It's really hard because you're so informative and so helpful. Can you stay for a little bit, or do you have to take off, or do you want people to email you, or?
We'll write you a note. Write you a permission note.
And I greatly appreciate that, but I do need to get going. But what I would be happy to do is if you want to arrange a time where we can come back and have another discussion.
So maybe we could do a coffee with Dennis?
Yeah, I'm happy to sit down, and again, I might not know the answer, but I'll ask about it and come back. And I want to tell you, I'm not trying to be dismissive of your point, ma'am. I'm just saying that we've tried over and over, and what we found success on is getting the transportation staff to look at it a little bit differently and revisit this thing and see if we can do it. The example that I'll give you is when Rick was trying to do the bike trail on the Sacramento River Bike Trail. That initial tranche of money he tried to get was in the transportation program and planning guide, and it was ranked as number 78. So when we asked for it, the city manager said, nope, 78, you don't get any money. We found out what the rules of the transportation program and planning guide were, rewrote the project to fit the rules, and it moved to number 11, and we got it funded. That's the point I'm trying to make, is we're trying to change the discourse so that we can do that. It's frustrating, it should be simple to put up a stop sign, but it's not, and we're trying to work through the process to get it done as quickly as we can.
Thank you so much, Dennis. Our last speaker, thank you so much for hanging out here. His name is Ron Lithicum. He's the Prosecution Supervisor for the District Attorney's Office. He's going to talk a bit about what's going on there.
Okay, you guys, it's past my bedtime. Thank you for having me. My name is Ron Lithicum. I supervise something called the Community Prosecution Unit. And we see things a little bit differently from some of your other speakers here tonight. We believe in something called the broken window theory. And that is, if you allow broken windows and petty crimes to exist, you know what you get? You get high-level crimes. You get a criminal element that roosts in our communities. So it's great to focus on the murders and the robberies, but unless you focus on that low-level stuff, you're never going to stop the murders and robberies. So my unit really focuses on quality of life crimes, and we really do that in two ways. The first is we go after slumlords or businesses that allow criminal activity to take place. I'll give you an example, and I'm going to do this quickly because I know you're all tired too. We had a national chain motel here in Sacramento County that generated 6,500 calls for service a year to law enforcement. So that means that police are tied up at these hotels instead of patrolling our neighborhoods, and they're allowing a criminal element. We sued them. They became fabulous partners with our unit. They adjusted their business model, problem solved. Those calls for service dropped down 90%. That's one way that we do it. Another way, slumlords who allow crime, allow code violations. We had one person lived in a $7 million house in Tiburon, put him in jail for 21 days. I've seen people do 20 years easier than that guy did those 21 days. But the point is, we go after the owners of properties who are allowing criminal activity to occur. Well, now that brings me to, how many remember the huge camp at Fair Oaks and Howe? You guys remember that? That was my unit that took that case, because I work in the county, and the businesses there were so many violations. There were guns in that homeless camp. There were rapes. There were sex assaults. There was vandalism on one of the water spigots that caused $10,000 worth of damage to a business there. What do we do? Well, I looked, who owns that land? You know who owned that land? It was the city of Sacramento. So what do? If it were a private owner that was allowing that behavior, I would go after them, wouldn't I? So we began doing what's called neighborhood surveys from the community to see what they said. We got hundreds of responses in one day. It was absolutely stunning how mad the citizenry was. So the bottom line is something's got to change. I think we all know that. Raise your hand if you agree with that statement. Okay, so COVID really harmed us a lot because the CDC said you can't move these homeless camps, you can't do this, you can't do that. We had the court system say that every crime, unless it was murder or something serious, was zero bail. That's in addition to Prop 47 that had already decriminalized stealing and drugs. That was a bad law. That did a lot of damage to our society because it used to be that if you went into Target, like that guy was talking about, and stole something, and you got caught, that's a misdemeanor. You come back the next day, you do it again, it's a felony. I can put you in prison. Not anymore. It's always a misdemeanor. You can do it 1,000 times a year. It will never be elevated to a felony as long as you stay below 950. So at the district attorney's office, we developed something called the CORE program. And we got the court to buy in on this, that if you have 10 or more citations in a 12-month period for these low-level, what the state considers to be low-level crimes, not me, but the state considers these to be low-level crimes, you now are ineligible for bail, meaning you're going to stay in jail until I can get to court to tell the judge why you need to be working in this unit for 6 years, and I have come into contact with thousands of individuals who are homeless. Many are not criminals, but by and large, they're suffering from addiction to narcotics. It's almost always methamphetamine or now fentanyl. So we use this program as leverage to get them into the treatment that they really need. I do not care if they spend 1 day in jail. I want to address the root cause of why they are harming our business community and our society by committing these low-level crimes every single day. And I want to stop it. And that's what we're committed to do at the district attorney's office. I could go on and on, but let me just answer your question. So let's go to questions. Go ahead.
10 citations in 12 months, you said.
Yes.
And there's no bail. So is this being communicated, I mean, to our lovely police officers? And
Yes.
Create maybe site for?
Yes. Well, okay. Now, it's a really good point because Sheriff Cooper in the county, he has come in and said that, you know, when COVID hit and it was kind of, everybody was told to hands off on homeless camps. Not that homeless commit crimes any more than anybody else, it's just it's very visible because they do it, when they do it, it's very visible in our community because that's where they live. And it's repetitive in nature. So Cooper came in and said, you know who are the victims a lot of times of those crimes? Other homeless people. So we are going to enforce the heck out of these camps. And Boise v. Martin, nothing in that says that you get to smoke meth, shoot up with a needle, trespass on Target, steal from Target. So why do we tolerate that? So a lot of politicians use Boise v. Martin as an excuse to do nothing. Oh, the court system. No, this is an enforcement problem. And until you get to that 10, and I can tell you, we have officers who are committed to this program, and they have cited 10 times in 4 days.
Okay, so the police department is getting the message to go ahead and cite.
Well, I hope so.
I hope so too.
I've got.
I want to see you in city council.
Okay, well, I've got to be careful. I work for Tin Ho, and you know Tin Ho is addressing these issues. I want to be diplomatic here. There are a lot of great Sacramento Police Department officers, phenomenal officers at the department.
Yes,
okay, we've had some great partnerships with them. So let me just say that. So
we love the police department.
Yeah, but it isn't. Look, it's an enforcement issue. The DA can't do anything unless we get the case. Who gives us the case? The police. So it's up to them to cite. But I'm not so sure when somebody was talking about compliance. What does compliance mean? Compliance means if you break the law, you get punished, like we do.
Right.
Like if you apply for a permit and are denied by the city, which we've all had that experience, but meanwhile, they're building structures in our parks. Nothing in Boise said they get to build a tree house, you know, a permanent structure in our city park. There's nothing in there that says that. So I think something has to change, and I think that the district attorney is committed to do it. Other questions? Yeah, in back.
I don't mean to belabor the target issue.
Yeah.
But there's a dramatic difference between the Target in West Sacramento and the one that's on Broadway. You go to the one in West Sacramento, nothing is locked up. They have Clinique, makeup. What is the difference here?
I've noticed the same. I've noticed the same thing. Yeah.
Two different cities? What's the difference here? I don't know. West Sacramento.
I think West Sacramento has a very aggressive police department. That's my opinion. That's what I've noticed. I mean, they seem like they're everywhere. And Sacramento police are understaffed, and I know that they have a high volume of calls. But if crime pays, you know what you get more of? Crime, and it pays right now. And we have to change that. And that's why this core program is slowly changing that. I can tell you that some of these offenders will know, hey, I am at number 8. Hey, please don't cite me again. I know I'm at number 8. They don't want to go. So you can talk to a methamphetamine addict all day long about getting treatment. They will never do it. You know that Fair Oaks and Howe?
Yeah.
They had over 50 attempts at social work before the enforcement part came in. You know how many people availed themselves of their help? 0. You know why? Because they're high out of their minds. They're not going to accept it. So the predicate for our program is that we give them a week to dry out, and then we talk. They're different people. Many times this is a terrible, terrible addiction. It is the worst narcotic known to mankind. If anybody wants to see a movie, it's called A Beautiful Boy. True story out of Marin County, if you've ever seen it. The best story of meth addiction. It is a sad, sad thing. Nobody deserves to live like that, and it's false compassion that people tolerate them to live like that. Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about the drug dealers and the drug dealer? We talk a lot about the people who are the addicts, but how do you keep the supply away from the demand? And how do we as citizens, who do we talk to, who do we speak up to say we want things to change? We want you to go after the drug
Your city
dealers.
council people, your legislature, be sure what you vote for. I've been in thousands of meetings. I've talked to thousands of people. I have yet to meet one person who voted for the Safe Schools and Street Act, which was Prop 47. It was not the Safe Schools and Street Act. It was the opposite of that. And then you'll hear politicians, and I've heard this one, crime is down because there's fewer calls. You know why? Because Target doesn't even bother to call the police anymore, because they know by the time they get there, the guy's an hour gone. So, yeah, calls are down, not crime. But, yeah, look, the way you get to drug dealers is you cite the users, they talk, and then you get information, and you work your way up. Catching dealers, we have to be on the spot. We have to start with the enforcement part. And problem-oriented policing, they do a good job, but it's not enough. We need more. We need more. Yeah.
That was a Prop 47, the one that
Yes.
equivalent. I have read that there's a motion in place or an effort to reverse that.
I believe 2 years ago they did try to reverse that, and it failed on the ballot. Yeah. Other questions?
So on the federal appellate case, the Boise case, some people say that the way the city's interpreting it is incorrect, and that they're saying we can't move a homeless person until we have a shelter space for them. That's a covered space. Whereas other people say that you can force them to go or require them to leave their space they're in, and then offer them the space over here, and not have a shelter, not have a facility that costs hundreds of thousands.
I think reasonable people can interpret cases in different ways, and I do believe there is a difference of opinion on this case. Nothing in Boise says that law enforcement and the society may not have reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions. Doesn't mean that they get to take over every city park. That's not what Boise says. So people that allow structures to be built, or that if it were really that simple, then why don't we all just move to city parks? No, they do not have a right to occupy the city parks in perpetuity.
And so, I know the DA's been working on this, but is there a mechanism where you can accelerate the process so you don't have 10 of these violations, or at least encourage the city to get 10 in 4 days?
Okay, so now look, that program was started here in Sac County by our unit, the district attorney's office. We did this, and the reason we had to do it was because of Prop 47. But I wanted it to be 5. But you have to understand, we have to sell this to the public defender's office. Half of our society thinks that this shouldn't be punished. So this is a compromise. The 10, yes, it's too high, but it's not insurmountable. The way that these offenders pick up cases is not insurmountable. Believe me, I was in court all day on these cases. We're busy. We're very busy.
Thank you for
Yeah.
listening.
Yeah. Other question, quickly. I gotta go to bed. All right, you guys, you've been a great group. Thank you. What committee citizens?
Okay, guys, that's it. If you could do me a favor and take your chair and just put it to the side, that would be great. Hopefully we'll have Ron come back and other people. Thank you so much. Take some information on the way out and have a